No SEC championship game for the Dogs for the first time since 2016, but still a schedule to play and games to win and recruits to bring in. We got Palmer Thoms on the line from Dogs 247 Sports. Please join him and the rest of the staff there. You know the brand 247 Sports is at the top of the line. So again, join Palmer right there. How's it going this week, Palmer?
I'm doing well, ready to cover some more football here. We missed out on an opportunity to see this team play last weekend when they were supposed to take on Missouri. I know Kirby Smart was really excited to play that game, felt like his team needed that game, especially coming out of the tough loss to Florida. So, obviously having that weekend off was nice little relaxing break, but ready to get back to some football.
This season will not meet expectations for one simple reason. The matchup against Florida was lost. Therefore, the Gators win the division unless all hell breaks loose, but we won't expect that to happen. So for the third consecutive year, it came down to one game, and for the first time, the Dogs did not win it. But another thing that is going on without change is bringing in the best talent in the state and some of the best talent in the country. Smile Munden being the latest, Palmer.
Yeah, 5-star commit out of Dallas, Georgia, Paulding County here in the Peach State. Big pickup for Georgia. He's listed as an outside linebacker, probably will play inside in college. But he's certainly got that length to play outside. Definitely a big pickup for Georgia. He's the number 3 ranked player in the state. And if you look at who's ranked above him, it's Amarius Mims and Brock Vandegrift, both of whom are Georgia commits. So, the Bulldogs, Kirby Smart, Bulldogs coaching staff are really hitting the state of Georgia hard this year with this recruiting cycle. They've got the top 3 guys as well as number 7, Micah Morris, and number 10, David Daniel. And they are definitely in the mix for number 9, Nyland Green. So that gives them 5 of the top 10 already and in the mix for a 6th in Green. So, as we approach national early signing period, in December, it'll be weird because in all likelihood there's going to be a game taking place on that Saturday. And Kirby Smart was asked about it, how he would handle the recruiting aspect and preparation for a game. It's different because in a normal year these coaches would be out on the road that week, going into homes, seeing these kids face to face, and obviously with COVID-19 and everything that's happened this year, that's not going to happen. So it's, certainly going to be an interesting cycle. Georgia is making a push up towards the top. They are now 5th, according to the nation's 247 Sports Composite team rankings. And so, I think, they're definitely making a push towards the top. They've got a couple pieces out there left, and, it'll be interesting to see how they finish up.
Munden, a top 25 player in the nation, according to the 247 Sports Composite, and that's regardless of position. 3rd-rated player in the state, as you just mentioned, Palmer, and 2nd-rated outside linebacker out of Dallas, Georgia. So the recruiting efforts are not broken. There is no question about that. Now we turn to the quarterback situation, and that seems to be the only thing wrong with this football team or the program right now, is identifying the best quarterback for the job and getting him developed and ready to play at a high level to lead what is an elite roster. So we've gone through, of course, Stetson Bennett after DeJuan Mathis played 2 quarters against Arkansas, back to Mathis against Florida for a certain amount of time after Stetson Bennett and the Bulldogs got behind by a couple scores. And now it appears as though JT Daniels will finally be on the field against Mississippi State.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting debut. I definitely know the people around here in Athens are excited to see that debut. And what we're assuming will be Daniels trotting out with the first team. It's definitely been a, roller coaster ride for Georgia's quarterback situation here. Going back to last season, with Jake Fromm in the mix, 3rd year starting quarterback. And, he had far from his best of seasons, but as much as that was on him, it was also on the wide receivers and offensive play calling and such. And so he ends up leaving after his 3 seasons as the starting quarterback. Georgia picks up grad transfer Jamie Newman out of Wake Forest. They end up picking up JT Daniels in May, late May, early June, transfer from USC. Looks like it'll be a competition between those two. Ends up being that Newman was the expected starter before he ends up opting out. Like you said, Dwan Mathis starts the season opener, goes 2 quarters before being replaced by Stetson Bennett, who has started every game since. So, we're to the point where, it like I said, it's been a roller coaster of quarterback play. Bennett had his moments against Auburn, against Tennessee, but as of late, it has not been great. 6 interceptions in the last 10 quarters to just 2 touchdowns, dating back to halftime of that Alabama game. They were shut out in the second half against the Crimson Tide, only put up 14 points against Kentucky, and both those came on the ground, and then put up 2 touchdowns against Florida through the air, one of which came from Dwan Mathis. So, I think the fact that they went to Mathis in that Florida game is probably more a result of him being the second string guy for much of the season because of JT Daniels and his injury history. And him coming off of a knee injury that he suffered at USC. I think he's been coming back from that. Kirby Smart says his mobility continues to get better. I don't think there's any question about his arm talent and his arm strength. He's been throwing with the scout team here in Athens, and I think, there's a lot of excitement to see what he can do when he gets out on the field under the Sanford Stadium lights on Saturday night.
Bennett comes in against Arkansas, and nobody was ever going to expect him to be the type quarterback that could carry the offense. He was just never that guy, never expected to be that guy. But he put together 3 very capable games against Arkansas, Auburn, and Tennessee. And Auburn probably is the best defense out of those 3. One of the probably top 4 or 5 units in the SEC. So he manages the game well. He makes the right reads, makes the right throws, doesn't make mistakes. Again, not going to throw for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, but makes the right decisions and puts together nice games in which they score points. And then suddenly, the first half against Alabama, there are chinks in the armor, and you see him make a few mistakes, but they're in the game, and he's putting points on the board, 20 in the first half, and then, or 24 in the first half. And then it all kind of unravels from there, and he starts making all sorts of glaring mistakes, and then that carried into the Florida game. Do you think, do you have any theory? I know it's all conjecture. We all watched the same performance, but based on what you're hearing out of players and coaches, and just based on your more in-depth analysis of Georgia football, what happened to Stetson Bennett?
Yeah, I think he lost his confidence. You saw, in those early games, he was walking around with the swagger. He came in, saved the day against Arkansas, was the guy, had everyone calling for the mailman, Heisman, not necessarily a favorite, but he was up there. He had Heisman odds. And I think that there was a lot of talk about him and his story and what he was doing. And all of a sudden, like you said, they showed chinks in that armor against Alabama in the first half. And then in the second half, he gets a ball batted, intercepted, had a bad play where he rolled out towards the sideline, threw back across the middle of the field, and he was the first to admit that he did not play well enough for Georgia to win that game. I think you could tell that he was upset after that game. You could tell that, like I said, he seemed to have lost a little bit of his confidence. And you started to hear the Georgia fans calling for a quarterback change. JT Daniels is on the sideline. He's his former 5-star, and I get it. I get Georgia fans wanting to see that, especially, given the history of Georgia quarterbacks, and the 5-stars that they've brought in and haven't worked out here between Jacob Eason and Justin Fields. And I think there were a lot of fans that were scared this would be just another, Eason or Fields, that he would be here for a year, maybe 2, and not get his chance. Looking back on those situations, obviously hindsight is 20/20 vision. But at the time, I don't think that there was a choice. You had to roll with Fromm in both those scenarios, given the fact that, in 2017, he came in for Eason, led the team to a big win at Notre Dame, led them to the SEC championship, once Eason was back, you couldn't go away from Fromm. And that was kind of the same narrative in 2018. You couldn't go away from the guy that had just led you to the SEC championship and was on the brink of a national championship. So I think, it's a different scenario, but I think that Georgia fans were calling for a quarterback change. I think, whenever you hear that, as much as these players block out the outside noise, they know what's happening. They know, they hear it. And I think, Stetson Bennett probably lost some of his confidence, and it just, it started to build up. All the negative energy started to build up, and ultimately resulted in him being banged up against Florida, having an AC joint sprain, and so then he tries to push through it, goes into the locker room, gets a shot, comes back out, tries to push through the pain. Kirby Smart said he just wasn't accurate enough, looked timid in the pocket, and so they end up rolling with Mathis against Missouri, or in the week leading up to the game that was supposed to be against Missouri, turns into a bye week. Bennett can't throw early on in the week, and so they've got to look elsewhere, and here comes Daniels taking the first team reps, and so I think that's what's brought us to this point where it looks like JT Daniels is going to be the starter on Saturday night against Mississippi State. Stetson Bennett has a great story. I think everyone will think fondly of him for what he's done, in his time as Georgia's starting quarterback, and no one's going to diminish what he did. But I do think if the Daniels, experiment, let's call it that, goes the way that Georgia fans hope, I think that a lot of people will be questioning, would this have happened early in the year? Was he just not healthy enough to take the job, or was Bennett really our best guy? So, I think, in terms of a Georgia fan's perspective, I think, like I said, there's a lot of excitement to see what JT Daniels can do. And in terms of what happened to Stetson Bennett, I think he just lost his confidence.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We discuss, debate, and analyze the sport that we all love each and every day. Hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell for the notifications. We go live multiple times each day, talking to guys like Palmer Toms here from Dogs 247 Sports, call-in shows all over the place, so lock it in. What did you see when you saw DeJuan Mathis step on the field against Florida? And I know that he was recruited across the board by all the huge schools, so I don't think everybody missed on this, or Georgia missed on it, because he could have gone just about anywhere, but he looked like a running back playing quarterback to me.
And he looked that way against Arkansas too. Trying to get outside of the pocket maybe a little bit too early, and he missed on some open throws, and that's not to say Bennett didn't miss on open throws early in that game. And that, who knows if Daniels will miss on those open throws. Kirby Smart calls those layups. He's said repeatedly since that game, you got to hit your layups. You got to make your layups. And so, for Georgia, I think that was the problem with Mathis. He did throw a nice ball across the middle to Kyrus Jackson for a touchdown, but the defender slipped there. So who knows what happens if that defender is able to make a play on the ball. But ultimately, I think what happened with Mathis is you got to be able, like Kirby Smart said, you got to hit those layups, and you can't miss open receivers. Georgia had a chance. As much as they were down in that first half, and headed into the second half, they had a chance. There was a chance that they could have gotten back in that game. Had they hit some of those layups. They had open receivers, with behind the defense and just overthrew guys. And so, I think that's probably what happened there. He's just missing his open receivers, and that's something that you can't do as an SEC quarterback, especially if you are playing for a program like Georgia that wants to win a national championship.
Looking back at JT Daniels' one starting season at USC, it's a bit underwhelming, but we'll put it into context. Just a shade under 60%, 14 touchdowns, 10 picks, about 2,600 yards passing. He had near elite wide receiver play, but the offensive line was horrendous for that team. They only went 5-7, and it's got to be put into context as well that he was basically stepping off a high school campus, missed his last year of high school to participate in spring ball in an unofficial way, just participated in like meetings, being at the practices, couldn't participate because he was still a high school senior, and then stepped on the field at USC immediately. pretty much immediately to quarterback the Trojans for that season. Unfortunately, got hurt the second game, his second season, after going 25 for 34 with a touchdown pass and a pick. So JT Daniels, much anticipated arrival. I got to think that in preparation for the Mississippi State offense this week and Mike Leach's attack, that they're throwing all sorts of passes in air raid style against the first team defense, getting them already. So Palmer, it's Mississippi State, South Carolina, Vandy. What do we expect to happen elsewhere with the schedule? Is the Missouri game going to float into a championship game weekend for Georgia?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I know Missouri and Vanderbilt were supposed to play earlier this season, had that game moved to December 12th. Georgia, as of now, does not have a game on that 12th. So, it may end up being a bye week, and then they play on the 19th, which is SEC Championship Saturday. But looking across the league, I think there's a lot of questions because, ultimately you've got LSU with games that were postponed against Alabama and Florida, and both those teams are looking like they're going to play in the SEC Championship. So you're not going to be able to make up one of those on December 19th. So, I have no clue. I think that's the, story of this year. The uncertainty of when things are going to happen. All I know is that, Georgia's supposed to play Mississippi State on Saturday, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Georgia can do with potentially JT Daniels at quarterback.
What are the players talking about, Kirby Smart talking about, because this is the first time that pretty much this entire roster, for the most part, is playing November football without a championship on the line?
Yeah, like you said earlier in the show, first time since 2016 that they'll likely not be making an appearance in the SEC Championship. That was Smart's first season, and there's a couple guys left over from that team, but for the most part, the seniors on this team were freshmen in 2017 when they went to the SEC Championship and National Championship. So, like you said, it's new territory for Georgia playing not meaningless November football, but football in November that's not going to get them in the college football playoffs or SEC Championship or whatever. More so you're competing for, are you going to make a New Year's Six bowl game, or are you going to be the representative in the Orange Bowl or in the Citrus Bowl or Outback Bowl? I think with this team, there's a lot of pride. You've got some seniors that came back for a chance to win the national championship. And you haven't seen those guys opt out since they've gotten out of contention, and they've had their time. They've had 2 weeks since that Florida loss. There's guys across the country that have opted out. And that easily could have been a route that Monty Rice went down. He's been playing banged up. Richard LeCount, who suffered, was involved in a scary automobile accident after the Kentucky game, missed the Florida game, and could easily just say, hey, I'm going to hang it up. I'm going to go, sit out the rest of this season and prepare for the NFL. He's tweeted, I'm not opting out. I want to get back out on the field. I want to, finish my career at Georgia in pads. I don't want to do it in sweats. And so, I think that shit says a lot about, where Kirby Smart has gotten this program, where some of those leaders are in terms of, their mindset and wanting to finish this season out strong. And I think, like you said, the schedule fares well for Georgia. Very front-loaded schedule in terms of playing Auburn and Tennessee and Alabama and Florida in the first half of the season. And so, I think that there's a lot of potential to gain some momentum late in the season and carry it over into next year, given the fact that these last 4 games are very winnable, could get Georgia into a good bowl game, play a quality opponent there, good performance there, and you take that momentum into a very challenging season opener next year against Clemson.
Yeah, you've got your players, coaches, hopefully not players and coaches, but certainly fan base and media that only care about championships and say, once you're out of the championship race, who cares? Play for next year, get the young guys ready. You got your other faction of people, me included, that care about rankings and records and bowl game appearances and so forth. So you finish off strong. You go 9-2. Your 2 losses were 2 to the top 5 teams in the country, and you win a major bowl game and you're 9-2, you're going to finish in the top 10 in the country if you're Georgia. And certainly That's who we're talking about. Palmer Tom's on the line from Dogs 247 Sports. Any thoughts on Mississippi State? This is the worst Bulldogs team that they've had in quite some time. Come out of the gate, go to Death Valley, put up 623 in the air on the defending national champions, but that was smoke and mirrors, and ever since it's been atrocious there.
Yeah, what I'll say about this game is it's going to be very interesting to see how Georgia defends them. Given the fact that Kirby Smart is, very adamant about playing man-to-man defense, that has not worked out well for teams against Mississippi State. It didn't work out well for LSU, like you mentioned. And you've seen teams go to a zone. Even when he's been questioned about, is he going to change his scheme? Is he going to, look into playing more zone defense? In terms of the performances against LSU last year in the SEC championship, Alabama and Florida this year, Kirby Smart has been pretty adamant on playing man-to-man defense. And so I don't know that he's going to play man-to-man defense this week. He compared this game to, the likes of going up against a triple option offense where you got to change your defense some. And so, obviously this is a completely different challenge than a triple option offense. It's opposite end of the spectrum entirely. Air raid offense, Mike Leach bringing something new to the SEC. And I think everyone's been trying to figure that out this year. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Georgia holds up. Scheme wise, are they going to try and go man to man, run with these receivers and get pressure on the quarterback? Because, Mississippi State is giving up, over 3 sacks a game, ranking 13th in the SEC with 3.17 there. Or are they going to, settle into a zone, be patient, and force Mississippi State to throw the ball and allow their defenders to make plays on it? So that's something that interested me here. Obviously, the quarterback situation, that's going to be a storyline for everyone across the country, not just here in Athens. It's something that a lot of people are looking at, and so I think that there's a lot to be, a lot of stories that can come out of Saturday. I think. In terms of, like I said, the quarterback play on offense and the way Kirby Smart adjusts his scheme to go against this high-powered Mississippi State air raid offense.
It's dogs on dogs for just 1 out of every 6 years because of the rotational system there in the SEC, Mississippi State and Georgia on Saturday on the SEC Network. Palmer Tom's, Dogs 247 Sports. Palmer, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.